There are laws currently on the table in China that may heavily impact how games can be developed, especially gacha games like Genshin Impact. The main regulation that has everyone talking is one that would restrict things such as daily login rewards, first-time top-up bonuses that we have in Genshin Impact, and consecutive recharge rewards, which is something that Genshin doesn't exactly have. Not exactly as I know it to be defined anyway. These regulations are meant to combat online and video game addiction, especially in regards to spending a lot of money at once. This is by no means the first time a law like this has been proposed, and certainly it will not be the first time it actually goes through. In 2017, a law was proposed and passed in China that was going to compel game developers to reveal the drop rates of things like loot boxes and gacha systems, and even include a pity system guaranteeing that even with poor luck, players would eventually get something for their efforts. And as we can see now, that even though that law only pertains to China and maybe a few other countries that adopted similar laws, this is kind of affected everywhere. Like, I don't think we have a law like this in North America, yet just like every version of Genshin, we know the rates of Genshin wishes, and we also have a hard pity system. And well, that's a good thing. Generally, the laws that have been proposed in the past and the ones that are being proposed right now are meant to be good for us, the consumer, the player. And many of these laws have even more restrictive things when you bring in minors. And well, that makes a lot of sense. Gacha is still gambling, and gambling is pretty damn addictive. When it's good, it's great. And when it's bad, well, you want to keep doing it more because you feel like your good luck is around the corner. So to go back to these new laws, things like daily login systems, Welkin Moon, first-time top-up bonuses, these are all things that get you to play the game more because ultimately you are trying to fuel the gambling. And this is a core of a lot of gacha games and even games that aren't gacha games. The worrying part about this is should these things pass and things like the Welkin Battle Pass, daily login rewards, they all go away, there needs to be some kind of replacement. Dailies and Welkin alone have given over 180,000 primos over Genshin's life. You think anniversary pisses people off? That would be disastrous. This proposed law was so alarming to investors in games that giant companies like Tencent and NetEase had their stocks drop considerably. As far as I know nothing about the stock market. We're talking absolutely nothing. But I hear people that know at least more than I do say how things like a 1 or 2% increase or decrease can be huge for a company. This GameRant article says that following this news, Tencent Holdings shares fell 16% at one point. His next biggest gaming company, NetEase, fell as much as 25%. These drops make up the bulk of an $80 billion total sell-off in China's gaming market over the last 24 hours. This much at least says that there are investors that are seeing these laws and go, oh, this ship is going down, and they just want out. They want no part of this because they think it is going to just hemorrhage money. And it might, for a time. We don't know how this affected Hoyoverse because they're a private company. I gotta imagine there are people internally that are very worried about this because every company is using them as the poster child for this because they have the daily login rewards, they have the Welkin Moon, they have a paid battle pass that does give you some primos and other things that are worth technically real money value. And even bigger than that, we have the first time top-up bonuses that refresh once a year around the anniversary, which is arguably the biggest part of the anniversary reward. Sadly, it's only for the paying customers. That is the one that I understand the most to be targeted because the first time top-up bonus that refreshes and is time sensitive is quite a big deal. How many of you out there feel like you've been forced to buy one because it is about to disappear and you view it as primos just vanishing? Welkin Moon and Dailies, on the other hand, I think there are a lot of players, this one's a little bit divisive. There are people who absolutely hate these practices, and there are also many players who just see them as pretty harmless things. You just log in once a day and you're good. For most people, it takes less than a minute. I do see the argument that it is an addictive practice. It is something that forces you to think about the game at least once a day. Maybe you end up playing for longer than you intended just because you logged on, you were like, oh, I got something else to do and I can do this and this. But damn, it is really hard to imagine those systems just being ripped out of the game. A lot of people would probably rejoice. And if it's replaced with something that gives us, say, like an entire month's worth of Welkin Moon in one lump sum purchase that we can buy once a month, maybe that would be better. Maybe that violates the regulations in another way that I'm just not capable of understanding because, well, I did not go to law school. I'm not a lawyer. I have nothing to do with any of this other than I'm a consumer that might be affected by it. And chances are, pertaining to at least Genshin Impact, if this does pass in China, China, it probably will affect North America. They absolutely have the capability to have a separate client or version of the game that does still sell the things outside of China. That just doesn't stop them from having to recoup the money that they would lose from these things being removed from the game in some way, shape, or form in the Chinese market. And chances are, if they change the game in that version of the game, they're probably going to change it for everybody, especially if they are just as good, if not better. It would be fantastic if out of this change we got some kind of better system, but honestly, how can you do that? How can you compensate for the massive loss of Primo Gems from Welkin, Moon, and Dailies? Do you just reallocate them to the Battle Pass if the Battle Pass somehow comes out unscathed from these regulations? And if so, how long before those same lawmakers look at Battle Passes and go, hey, you just moved it is all, now we're looking at that? If somehow from this daily quests become abolished from games like this, well, all of a sudden weekly quests becomes the new enemies, then monthly quests, then Battle Passes period, and how long before it's just anything that most players would describe as FOMO, which is a lot of things. I mean, that's anything that is only around for a limited time. Some events we've gotten have also encouraged players to log in every day, such as the Lieben event. That one is very popular, and when it's around, it's just free extra primos every day. It's like having a second daily quest, and if you miss a day, it's gone. Surely that would probably count under these new regulations as well. And there's something else. Many of these articles are all talking about the same things: no daily login bonuses, no first time top up bonuses, and continuous recharge. Those are the ones that everyone is talking about. However, there's one I've seen mentioned in other places where gacha games specifically, or anything with a gacha like mechanic, may be forced to include a way to directly purchase anything rewarded from the gacha system directly for a comparable value. I'll read this directly from the .gg.gg website with an article they wrote. It says, embracing a healthier gaming landscape. In the second point here, it says, taming the gacha beast. Developers must ensure reasonable drop rates and provide direct purchase options, potentially ending the gamble for coveted in-game items. In researching this, I have looked at dozens upon dozens of articles about this and just see the same stuff on every website again and again and again. But this point is something that only a few have mentioned so far, and how? This seems like one of the biggest things about all of this, and it's one of the things that most players would be really damn excited to hear about. The potential to never have to just roll or wish for characters ever again and just be able to buy things that you want for a flat value. What would they be considering a fair price? Is fair to them going to like hard or soft pity twice and losing your 50-50? Because nobody would do that. Everyone would just gamble instead. Would they consider it winning your 50-50 on a soft pity once? Because I feel like everybody would just buy the flat value you want instead. Either way, this is huge. I mean, like, I'm coming from the perspective that Genshin was really like my first gacha game ever, and it's still one of the only ones I play, with Honkai Star Rail being the other one. It's becoming alarming because these games are very high quality. Once upon a time, it was so easy to ignore gacha games because their quality was just really bad looking. I mean, I'm not here to insult things that you all loved possibly, but I always looked at gacha games and just thought that looks like a steaming pile of garbage, something that I would never play in a million years. As a huge Fire Emblem fan, of course I tried Fire Emblem Heroes when it came out, and I hated it. It took less than a day for me to drop that game and lose all interest in it, and luckily I never spent money on it because it just looked like you were buying overpowered PNGs. Those days, however, are gone. Gacha games are getting better and better. Genshin is what most people would call a AAA game in a lot of ways. The time and effort they put into the music, the art, the constant game development, like, you can say a lot of negative things about Genshin, but it is a very, very well-made game, and if there wasn't the gacha aspect to it, it would be beloved by way more people. Being successful despite being a gacha game is part of the problem, sadly. I mean, like, the better these gacha games get and the more successful they get, the more it encourages other companies to do the same. And that worries me. I don't want a future where almost every good-looking game just has a gacha system attached to it, because I feel like I can only play so many gacha games. Playing them free-to-play can be satisfying in its own right, but it can also be just very demoralizing when you don't get a new character for a very long time. You also never know when a really appealing character is going to come out that just bends your will enough to spend when you already resolved yourself to not spending money on it. These regulations may be exactly what we need to really put the stop to gacha and just slow it the hell down. I think there is a place for these games, but I don't want it to become like every good game that's being developed just has a gacha system implemented because it's so wildly successful. I think that many of you are going to see all of this as a net positive, but I would love to hear what you think down in the comments. Like, do you think this is a bad thing? As many articles here mentioned that I didn't really bring up, this is mostly going to affect smaller developers more than larger ones. Large companies like HoYoverse, NetEase, Tencent. They have the R&D, they have the power, they can figure out an alternative. They can find loopholes. People are really good at finding loopholes, as the fiery hellscape that is Twitch.tv is currently showing us, and has been for quite a long time. That's more or less my thoughts on this. You know, I think the window for people to comment on this and for companies to give their input on these regulations, I think that window's open until about midway through January, which I remember reading somewhere in one of these articles. So we'll have to wait until then to see exactly what happens with the situation. You know, I think no matter what, it's going to be good for us. Large games will be fine. Genshin is going to be fine. They make more than enough money and they will find an alternative should they be forced to change. Small companies, that may be a bit of a different story. Thank you to you for watching. Hope you had a good holidays if you celebrate that. If not, hope you just had a good week, good time, good month, whatever. Thank you to my members, my patrons for supporting me as always, and bye.
Attaboy!